سمو زي تناقره ماني من بارز نبره أبسلام أبتنكر حبروخي كياره أمسايات نفسه نفسه زخبره هاقرو زفكره نسيو زخبره ماني سمو زي تناقره ماني من بارز نبره أبسلام أبتنكر حبروخي كياره أمسايات نفسه نفسه زخبره هاقرو زفكره نسيو زخبره
إثيوبيا كارتا كل تግራይ سريقني بزبل رأسي زصحفو عنقص مذكار ጥራይ ንዕሸልነትን መታለሊ ባህሪያትን መራሕቲ ወያኔ አጸቢቁ ዘጉልሕዩ እትዘገርም መራሕቲ ወያኔ እትባዕሎም ዝሓንጸጽዎ ካርታ ንሶም ጥራዮም ዝፈልጥዎ ብዛዕባ ናይ ዶብ ኩነታት መብርሂ ክብ ኣብ ቴሌቪዥን ኢትዮጵያ ዝተዓደመ ሓደ ምሁር ኢትዮጵያዊ እቲ ናይ መራሕቱ ዓጀውጀው ግዲ ኸይገበረ ከምዚ ዝስዕብ ኢሉ
ኣብ ዩኒቨርሲቲ አዲስ አበባ ንብርክት ዝበሉ ዓመታት ኣብ ምስማር ዝርከቡ ኣይተ ተክለ ሃይማኖት ገብረስላሴ
ዘብዚ ዘሎ ናይ ፌደሬሽን ካርታ ዘርኢ መስመር ንክሕዝ ተገይሩ ኣብዚ ኦምን ሓጀር ትበላላ ኣብዚ ድማ ማይታ ትበላላ ኣብዚ ከባቢ እዚ ኩሉ ሽማት እንዳቆርሒ ኣብዚ ውኒ ታኹራ ዝብል እንባ ወይ ጎቦ ኣሎ ንሱ ሓሊፍካ ካብዛ ኣብዚኣ ዘላ መትከል ናብዛ ኣብዚኣ ዘላ ማይ ኣንበሳ ትበሃል ጫፍ ኣብዚኣ ማይ ኣንበሳ ትበሃርዋ ምሳ መረብ ትራኸበላ እያ ንሳ እያ ቀንዲ ናይ ጫፍ ናይ ታመስመር ካብዚኣ ጀሚር ናብዚ ዘሎ ቁኑዕ መስመር ወይ ድማ ቁኑዕ ሕንፃፅ ስለዝኾነ ዘከራኽራይ ክኸውን
ሓቁኻ እዚ መስመር እዚ ተቐይሩ ይፈልጥን ኣይ ክቕየርን ከ እዩ ዓማጺ ሰላማውን ሕጋውን መንገዲ ክኽተል ዕላምዋ የፍቅደሉኒ ዓመፅ ብሕጊ ክትግበር ስለ ዘይክእል ዓመፅቲ ፍትሕን ምርግጋፅን ሓቅን ምጉዕፃፅን ክኽተልዎ ዘለዎም እንኮ መንገዲ ሓይልን ምትላልን ስለ ዝኾነ ከዓ ወያኔ ከምዚ ሕጂ ሓቂ ከይተቐልዐት ንህዝቡን ማሕበረሰብ ዓለምን ኣታሊሉ እዩ ንኹናት ነቒሉ ብ13 ግንቦት 1998 ፓርላማ ኢትዮጵያ ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራ ብወግዒ ኩናት ምስ ኣወጀ እቲ ቅድሚኡ ዝነበረ ምትኹታኽ ስርዓት ወያኔ ንኹናት ብትዕግስቲ ህዝብን መንግስትን ኤርትራ ተሰጊሩ ብምንባሩ እቲ ኣዋጅ ንህዝብታት ክልቲአን ሃገራትን ማሕበረሰብ ዓለምን ሃንደበት ይኾይንዎ በዚ ምኽንያት ድማ ብዙሓት ደለይቲ ሰላም ወገናት ቅዱሳት መራሕቲ ሃገራት መንግስታትን ውድባትን ነቲ ጸገም ንምፍታሕ ተጓየዩ ካብቶም ቀዳሞት ተበግሶ ዝወሰዱ መንግስታት አሜሪካን ሩዋንዳን ዋና ጸሓፊ ውድብ ሕብራት ሃገራት ውድብ ሓድነት አፍሪካ ዞባዊ ውድባት ኢጋድን ሰሓለ ሰሃራን ካልኦት ውልቀ መራሕቲ ሃገራትን ይርከቦም ኣብ መንጎ ኣስመራን አዲስ አበባን እናተመላለሱ ድማ እቲ ጉዳይ ናብ ሰላማውን ሕጋውን መንገዲ ከቕንዕ ዝከኣሎም ጽዒሮም ኣብዚ ባይታ ሰላምን ሕግን ንምጥጣሕ ዝግበር ዝነበረ ዲፕሎማሲያዊ መገሻታት እዚ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ቀዳማይ ዶባት ክልቲአን ሃገራት ካብ ወታደራዊ ህላዌ ናይ ክልቲኡ ወገን ነጻ ኮይኑ ተዓዘብቲ ከኣትዎ ካልኣይ ብመሰረት መግዛእታዊ ውዕላት ብኣሃዱ ካርቶግራፊ ውድብ ሕብራት ሃገራት ምምልካት ዶባት ክግበር ይጽውዕ ነይሩ ድሕርቲ ልዕሊ 2 ሰሙን ዝቐጸለ ምምልላስ ብ4 ሰነ 1998 በአሜሪካን ሩዋንዳን ዝረቐቐ ሓደ ናይ ሰላም እማሜ ንክልቲአን ሃገራት ቀሪብለን መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ነቲ እማሜ ከም ዝተቐበሎን ምሕባር ኣብ ዘውፅኦ መግለጺ እቲ ሕመረት ነጥብታት ናይቲ እማሜ ምስቲ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ዘቕርቦ ናይ መፍትሒ ሓሳባት ዝሰማማዕ ምዃኑ ብምግላጽ እቶም ኣሳለጥቲ ጻዕሮም ብምቕጻል እቲ ዘቕርቦ እማሜ ብዝርዝር ቅጥዕታት ኣተገባብርኡን ናይ ግዜ ሰሌዳን ክህብትምዎን ዝያዳ ከነጽርዎን ርእይትኡ ገሊጹ ኣብቲ ዕለቲ ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ስርዓት ወያኔ ኢትዮጵያን እማመ ሰላም ሩዋንዳን ኣሜሪካን ከም ዝተቐበለቶ ብዘይ ንጹርን ህውቱትን መንገዲ ድሕር ምግላጽ ምስኡ ኣተሓይዙ ሰራዊቱ ሽዑ መዓልቲ ንኹናት ተኣዚዙ ከም ዘሎ ዝሕብር ሓደ ንሰማዒኡ ዘስደመመ መግለጺ እዩ ኣስሚዑ
በአሜሪካና በሩዋንዳ መንግስታት የቀረበውን አስታራቂ ሐሳብ መደገፉን የሚቀጥል ቢሆንም በመሆኑም የኢትዮጵያ መከላከያ ኃይል የአገሪቱን ዳር ድንበር ለማስከበር ተፈላጊ ሆኖ የተገኘውን እርምጃ ሁሉ እንዲወስድ በዛሬው ቀን ታዟል። ወቅቱ የአገሪቱን ዳር ድንበር ለማስከበር አስፈላጊ የሆነውን እርምጃ ሁሉ መውሰድ የሚጠይቅ በመሆኑ መላ የሀገራችን ህዝቦች በየአካባቢው ከሚገኙ የመንግስት አካላትና ከመከላከያ ኃይላችን የሚሰጣቸውን መመሪያ መሰረት በማድረግ የሀገራችንን ዳር ድንበር ለማስከበር የሚያስችሉ እርምጃዎችን ሁሉ እንዲወስድ ጥሬን አቀርባለሁ።
ነቲ ናይ በአሜሪካን ሩዋንዳን ዝቀረበ መተዓረቀ ሐሳብ ደገፍና ቀጻል ኮይኑ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ መከላከያ ኃይሊ ዶባት ሃገርና ንምኽባር ኩሉ አድላይ ስጉምቲ ክወስድ በዝሎም ዕም መዓልቲ ተአዚዙሎ ዘሎናያ ወቅቲ ዶባት ሃገርና ንምኽባር አድላይ ስጉምትን ወስደሉ ጊዜ ስለ ዝኾነ መላእ ህዝቢ ሃገረይ አበየ ከባቢኡ ብዝርከቡ ናይ መንግስቲ አካላትን ሰራዊትን ዝውሃቦም መምርሒ መሰረት ብምግባር ዶባት ሃገርና ከኽብር ዝኽእል ኩሉ ዓይነት ስጉምታት ክውሰድ ጻውዒተ የመሓላልፍ ክብል እዩ ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ወያነ መግለጺኡ ዛዚሙ። ብሓጺሩ ነቲ እማመ ሰላም ንቀበሎ እምበር ኩናት ክቕጽል እዩ ኣይከቋርጽን እዩ ዝትሕዝትኡ መልእኽቲ እዩ ኣመሓላሊፉ። ሰራዊት ኢትዮጵያ ግን ሽዑ ይኮነን ንኩናት ተኣዚዙ ኣይሰለጦ እንዳ እምበር ነቲ ኣብ ከባቢ ባድመ ዝወልዖ ግጭት ናብ ሓፈሻዊ ኩናት ብምዕራግ ኣብ መወዳእታ ወርሒ ግንቦትን ቀዳማይ ሰሙን ወርሒ ሰነን ኣብ መረብ ሰቲት ከባቢ ኣንበሰተ ገለባን ቡረን ተደጋጋሚ ፍሹል መጥቃዕታት ተካይዱ ነይሩ እዩ። ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ወያነ ሰራዊቱ ኩሉ ኣድላይ ስጉምቲ ክወስድ ተኣዚዙ ኣሎ ዝበሎ እምበር ነቲ ናይ ኣጋር መጥቃዕታት ንምምልካት ኣይነበረን። ሰራዊት ኢትዮጵያ ክሳብ ሽዑ ዘይፈተኖ ሓይሊ ኣየር ክጥቀም እዩ ትእዛዝ ተዋሂብዎ። ብርግጽ ድማ ንጽባሒቱ 5 ሰነ ነፈርቲ ኩናት ናይቲ ዝዓበደ ስርዓት ኣብ መዕሩፎ ነፈርቲ ኣስመራ ደብዳብ ኣካየዳ። ወዮ ደኣ ዘይተጸበዮ ዘሰንብድ መልሰ ግብሪ ረኺቡ እምበር ሓይሊ ኣየር ኢትዮጵያ ብቐጻሊ መጥቃዕታት ንህዝብን መንግስትን ኤርትራ ከርዕድ እዩ ተኣዚዙ ነይሩ። ምዚ ተኣሳሲሩ ድማ ስርዓት ወያነ ኩለን ናብ ኤርትራ ዝበራ ናይ መጓዓዝያ ነፈርትን መራኽብን ክወቕዐን ምዃኑ ዝገልጽ መፈራርሒ መልእኽቲ ኣመሓላሊፉ ምንባር እውን ዝዝከር እዩ። እቲ ናይ ኣየር መጥቃዕታት ነቲ ወጥሪ ዝያዳ ዝዕርግ ብምንባሩ ፕረዚደንት ሕቡራት መንግስታት ኣሜሪካ ነበር ቢል ክሊንተን ብ15 ሰነ 1998 ጊዜያዊ ብኣየር ናይ ዘይምጥቕቓ ውዕል ማለት ሞራቶሪየም ናብ መራሕቲ ክልቲአን ሃገራት ኣቕሪቡ። መንግስቲ ኤርትራ እቲ በአሜሪካ ዝቀረበ ሐሳብ ናብ ሓፈሻዊ ስምምዕ ምቁራጽ ተጻቦታት ዘሰጋግር ሓደ ኣወንታዊ ስጉምቲ ክኸውን ዘለዎ ተስፋ ብምግላጽ ሙሉእ ብምሉእ ከም ዝተቐበሎ ከፍልጥ እንከሎ እቲ ምስኩሉ ዝተሰከሞ ክሳራታት ንኩናት ምህንዳት ዘየቋረጸ ስርዓት ወያነ ግን ሕጂ እውን ዘገርም መግለጺ ያውፅዩ። ኢትዮጵያ ነቲ ብፕረዚደንት ክሊንተን ዝቀረበ በአየር ዘይምጥቕቓዕ ጊዜያዊ ውዕል ተቐቢላቶላ እንተኾነ ኣብ ዝደለየቶ ጊዜ ነቲ ሞራቶሪየም ከተፍርሶም መሰላ ዝተሓለወ እዩ ይብል መግለጺ ስርዓት ወያነ። ከምቲ ዝብእስ ክሳብ ዝደልዎ ይሕንክስ ዝበሃል ክሳብ ዝደልወና ተቐቢልና ያለና እዩ ቃና ናይቲ መግለጺ። ንኩናት ዝህንደዱ እቶም ኩናት ዘይፈልጥዮም ዝብል ብሂል ኣሎ። ህዝብን መንግስትን ኤርትራ ኩናት ዘኸትሎ ዕንወት ዘባኽኖ ጊዜን ጸጋታትን ኣዕሚቖም ስለ ዝርድኡ ኩሉ ናይ ሰላም ተኽእሎታት ክድህስሱን ምሳሳለጥቲ መንገዲ ሰላም ልዑል ምትሕባር ክገብሩን እንከለዉ መራሕቲ ወያነ ግን ንኩሉ ናይ ሰላም ዕድላት እናዓፀው ሓቂ ብሓይሊ ክዕምፅፁ ንኩናት እዮም ተሃንዲዶም። በትሪ ሓቂ ግን ሓይልን ምትላልን ኣይከርተማን።
Eritrea and Ethiopia signed the cessation of hostilities and the comprehensive peace agreements in Algiers in June and December 2000. A boundary commission set up to give its rulings on the borders between the two countries announced its decision on the 13th of April 2002, once again confirming Badme's sovereign Eritrean territory.
The main points of the Boundary Commission's decision clearly stipulate that sanity has won over insanity. The rule of law has prevailed over the rule of jungle.
Ethiopia continued to play around with the decision, looking for variations to the final settlement. In undermining and insulting the intelligence of the United Nations and guarantors of the peace agreement, the regime continues to try and violate the sanctity of the final and binding rulings of the Boundary Commission.
Because in any court possible, final and binding is final. You don't appeal, no matter what.
Ethiopia's leaders have assumed their lawlessness and aggressive policy because that has been emboldened by the past patterns of unjustifiable tolerance by the international community. The number one question now remains, where does the international community stand in all this commotion? When the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission gave its verdict on the 13th of April 2002, the Ethiopian regime entered into a one-horse race to issue a false statement regarding its satisfaction with the border rulings. Let's go back to April 2002 and what Ethiopia's foreign minister had said back then, apart from the fabrications of lies and the misrepresentation of the Boundary Commission's decision regarding Badme.
The main points of the Boundary Commission's decision clearly stipulate that sanity has won over insanity. The rule of law has prevailed over the rule of jungle. This decision has rejected any attempt by Eritrea to get reward for its aggression. This decision was fair and legal. Badme and its surroundings, which Eritrea invaded and occupied May 1998 on the basis of its false claims, has now been decided by the Commission that Badme and its surroundings belong to Ethiopia.
The decision of the Boundary Commission, however, indicated anything but what the Ethiopian foreign minister stated during a press conference on the very same day in April 2002. As far as Badme goes, the Boundary Commission observes on page 84 of its decision that the area of claimed administration does not extend in any significant way towards the Ethiopian claim line. Further down on the same page, it states that the Commission does not find in them evidence of administration of the area sufficiently clear in location, substantial in scope, or extensive in time to displace the title of Eritrea that had crystallized as of 1935. But the Ethiopian foreign minister's attempt to deceive the world, and particularly the people of Ethiopia, is a big disgrace to the international community.
The Eritrean regime is obliged to accept and implement this decision. That's the only option they have. Eritrea has signed the Algers Agreement and has accepted that the decision of the Boundary Commission would be final and binding. So Eritrea is called upon to immediately proceed for the implementation of the decision of the Boundary Commission.
Either the Ethiopian Prime Minister and his foreign minister did not know what they're talking about, or there is a serious lack of communication within the regime. No matter how you slice it, the bottom line is that 1,000 lies can never add up to substitute the truth.
Boundary Commission is still responsible for the demarcation of this delimited boundary between the two countries. The Commission has made it clear to both parties that there should not be any gap between the delimitation and demarcation process. It's calling for an immediate engagement in order to proceed into demarcation. So it's our hope that it would begin very soon.
Unless members of this rogue Ethiopian regime are suffering from amnesia and cannot seem to remember all the lies they fabricated in the past, it certainly does not give anyone the impression that the regime is politically mature when its prime minister writes a letter on September 19 to officially declare Ethiopia's unequivocal rejection of the decision. Ethiopia's prime minister, in his letter to the UN Secretary General Mr. Kofi Annan, declared that the boundary demarcation process is in terminal crisis. The prime minister heaps insult on the Boundary Commission, dismisses its judgment as totally illegal, unjust, and irresponsible, and calls on the Security Council to set up an alternative mechanism to demarcate the contested parts of the boundary. He further suggests that UNMI pack up and leave and pleads for international recognition and endorsement of Ethiopia's occupation of sovereign Eritrean territories. Ethiopia's provocative letter represents nothing less than a wholesale assault on fundamental principles of international law, the key tenets of the Algers Peace Agreements, as well as UN Security Council Resolution 1507. It is replete with blatant lies and distortions in its account of the legal principles and findings that the Boundary Commission invoked in determining the location of Badme. The Prime Minister's letter contrasts sharply with the public statement of his government when the Boundary Commission announced its decision on the 13th of April 2002. Ethiopia had then urged the international community to put intense pressure on Eritrea to accept and implement the decision of the Boundary Commission fully and faithfully. It declared full legal victory and even bragged about its successful litigation strategy that was hinged on a maximalist approach of exaggerating its claims to include territories that never belonged to it. This revelation, which is in fact true, was repeated by both the Prime Minister and his Foreign Minister in a report to the Ethiopian Parliament. The world has come to know by now who has been behind the delays in the peace process. If only the Ethiopian Foreign Minister would hear himself and the statements he made in April in an attempt to deceive the world and violate the rule of law.
Eritrea has signed in Algiers that the decision of the Boundary Commission would be final and binding. And Eritrea cannot and must not take any recourse except to accept this decision and commit itself to the speedy implementation of this decision.
It certainly does not seem like Eritrea has any problems whatsoever with the Boundary Commission's decision. The regime in Ethiopia, which on the other hand had boasted victory when the Boundary Commission gave its verdict, seems to have changed its mind about the validity of the decision. Here is where the regime seems to misunderstand the core of the decision. Article 4.2 of the Algers Peace Agreement unambiguously states a neutral boundary commission composed of 5 members shall be established with a mandate to delimit and demarcate the colonial treaty boundary based on pertinent colonial treaties 1900, 1902, and 1908 and applicable international law. Article 4.15 further states the parties agree that the delimitation and demarcation determinations of the Commission shall be final and binding. Each party shall respect the borders so determined, as well as the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the other party. Ethiopia cannot thus arbitrarily and unilaterally discard these key provisions of the peace agreement or urge the Security Council to set up a new mechanism.
And the Boundary Commission is an independent body. It's like a tribunal that will make a decision based on facts. Facts are based on the colonial treaties. The colonial treaties are very clear. The mandate of the Boundary Commission is clearly defined. by the agreement signed. Both governments signed this agreement in December the year 2000, and the Boundary Commission will base its decision on the validity of the arguments that were brought by both parties during the year 2001, and the final decision will definitely be in congruence to the agreement signed. So I don't think why one can expect any foreign government or power be involved in the process of the arbitration.
In its bid to sound convincing in its case, the regime also argues that the people of Ethiopia will not accept the decision of the Boundary Commission, and that Ethiopia will be embroiled in a political crisis and civil war if they accept. These hackneyed arguments have been used by previous Ethiopian leaders to justify their wars of occupation. The truth is that the people of Ethiopia have enjoyed internal harmony only when they were at peace with Eritrea. Ethiopia became a source of instability in the region, while its people became the victims of recurrent famines and pestilence at any time that it was at war with Eritrea. The regime in Ethiopia claims not to be satisfied with the decision, and as far as it is concerned, its war agenda remains intact. But the fact is, there was no good faith border dispute in the first place that could have led to war. The Ethiopian people hardly knew about Badame, and there was no popular demand pushing for war. Neither was it the regime's goodwill and desire to resolve the conflict legally that led to the formation of the Boundary Commission. The TPLF's underlying motive for unleashing the war was neither a dispute over Badame nor some other border issue. The TPLF's singular objective was to inflict military humiliation on the Eritrean people and dehumanize them, frustrate their efforts for economic development and prosperity, and reduce them to a third or fourth class people and country. Such a heroic and pompous achievement would, the TPLF presumed, further bolster its status and monopoly of power in Ethiopia and permanently secure its dominance of the country. But war did not produce the outcome that the TPLF craved for. Arbitration had not appeased its insatiable appetite. This is precisely why the regime has been engaged in devising all sorts of obstructions to reverse the decision of the Boundary Commission. But the president of the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission writes in his letter to the UN Secretary-General in response to the Ethiopian Premier's letter. Sir Elihu Lothar-Pact says the Ethiopian Premier's letter is a cause of considerable disquiet to the Commission, and that the statements made in it are to the Commission's regret misconceived and misleading. The Commission does not accept Ethiopia's assessment on the Commission's work as being in terminal crises. There is no crisis, terminal or otherwise, which cannot be cured by Ethiopia's compliance with its obligations under the Algers Agreement, in particular its obligations to treat the Commission's delimitation determination as final and binding, and to cooperate with the Commission and its experts and other staff in all respects during the process of demarcation.
So they went through all the kind of games, you know. They say, well, we have accepted the verdict, but they put and say, we are asking them to change. Mm-hmm. I think what I can only say is that is insulting the international community's intelligence. Mm-hmm. In particular, it's insulting the intelligence of the Ethiopian people. Because in any court proceeding, final and binding is final. You don't appeal, no matter what.
In Eritrea's view, Ethiopia's leaders have assumed their lawlessness and aggressive policy because that has been emboldened by the past patterns of unjustifiable tolerance by the international community. No action was taken against Ethiopia when it violated the moratorium on airstrikes brokered by the United States and launched its second offensive in February 1999. No action was taken against Ethiopia when, in violation of the technical arrangements which were forged by the United States, the European Union, the United Nations, and the Organization of African Unity, and considered final and binding, it launched its third offensive in May 2000. Ethiopia has now achieved the apex of its record of lawlessness, contempt for the rule of law, treaty obligations, and the UN Charter by rejecting the final and binding decisions of an arbitration commission. The reputation of the UN body and guarantors of the peace process could be at stake unless Ethiopia is told enough is enough and Article 14 of the Algers Agreement is invoked.
If you look at the provisions of the Agreement on Cessation of Hostilities, in Article 14, particularly Article 14A, both the OAU and the United Nations have undertaken to guarantee respect for the commitment that the two parties have made in accordance with this agreement. And these provisions or these measures could include, of course, enforcement measures under the United Nations Charter to be taken by the United Nations Security Council. They could start from freezing all forms of development cooperation with the recalcitrant party. They can go step by step to imposing an embargo. They could also go all the way up to the invocation of collective security measures.
Article 14 of the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement states, among other things, that the OAU and the United Nations commit themselves to guarantee the respect for the commitment of the two parties until the determination of the common border on the basis of pertinent colonial treaties and applicable international law. This guarantee shall be comprised of measures to be taken by the international community should one or both of the parties violate this commitment, including appropriate measures to be taken under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. Yet, while all the ingredients and safeguards of success are there, the dangers of failure of the peace process is now distinct due to the failure of the international community to take seriously its obligations under this agreement and to take effective measures. Unless appropriate action is taken now before the situation explodes, crisis management will be too late and will not be worth the efforts.
The UN Security has clearly spelled whoever does not implement this, Chapter 7. Chapter 7 means that they would invoke some kind of actions, as well as military and economic actions.
Right, okay.
Economic sanctions and as well as military actions if need be. But I think the bottom line is the Commission even put out in a very clear what they call a document observation. So they have clearly spelled out, they're saying Ethiopia's whatever pretext, whatever justification they try to give is not acceptable and completely rejected. It has, in a black and white, has rejected it.
The people of Eritrea and Ethiopia have been denied peace for more than 3 decades. This has had a devastating effect on their economies. They deserve peace and development, which are now recognized as human rights. Yet, such peace can be guaranteed only by respect for the rule of law, the sanctity of agreements, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity established by arbitration decisions made on the basis of solemn agreements. Eritrea has always been and will continue to be committed to such peace. It is now up to the international community, and in particular the Security Council, to uphold these principles. In essence, Ethiopia is no longer in conflict with Eritrea, but with a charter that the Security Council must uphold, as it has done in several similar cases before.
It's not even the issue between Eritrea and Ethiopia now, the regime. It's not. There is the Wayane regime versus the international community. So what our role is, we have said we'll implement it to the letter and spirit, period. Because it's a verdict.
Right.
A verdict, once you go to court, once you have paid, once you have argued, I mean, piles and piles and piles of documents were presented by Ethiopia. Piles and piles and piles of documents were presented by Eritrea. The lawyers, they went even to the century, the Turkish time, the Italian time. You would be surprised. The documents are full of, they are full of each rooms. The Ethiopian documents and our documents, you would be surprised. They went even to pieces of paper that were correspondence between the Italian emperor, the Ethiopian emperor, the Turkish emperor, and the British emperor. All these files have been filed. The judge saw every single piece of document, and their verdict was based on the arguments the lawyers have put. Now I read something saying, oh, the judges must have gone, the commissioners must have gone and seen the things on the ground. That was something to be delivered in the court proceedings. You don't say it after the verdict. Their lawyers could have said, Your Honor, you have to go and look first before you give the verdict. But they agreed on the day of the verdict. They agreed on the deliberation. They have exhausted all their evidence. They have presented it. So we're all both waiting for the verdict that day. So the verdict was passed based on our own lawyers' agreement and country's agreement. So you cannot change, you cannot revise the whole exercise again and again. So that was what final and binding means. You cannot appeal.
And what final message would the Ethiopian foreign minister want to convey to the international community?
Inform the people of Ethiopia and that of Eritrea that aggression does not pay.
Well done, Mr. Foreign Minister. No one else could have said it any better, that the international community should play its rightful role in making sure the regime in Ethiopia bows down to the rule of law and international agreements.
سمو زي تناقر ماني